Hey everybody, it's Dave here from Dragonhill Games, and you're watching This Week in MTG Finance. As always, and before we get started, I want to thank MTG Stocks for allowing us to use graphical information for the purposes of this video. Well, we got another big week this week. There's a lot of slivers on the move, and our big winner is up almost 3,500% due to some combo interactions with some cards we've seen spoiled from STRIXHAVEN. So let's dive right into our top 10 list. And we're going to start right here with STRIXHAVEN Inspector from Time Spiral Remastered. Our number 10 winner this week is up 164%. And this version of STRIXHAVEN Inspector from Time Spiral Remastered is one that got one of these old border treatments. I was actually talking about this a little bit in my video last week, that the modern era playables that got a old border treatment from Time Spiral Remastered are really on the move or going to be moving soon. So if you can get your hands on any of these playable cards, and I'm talking about the playable ones, things like Monastery Swiftspear, Remand, Thoughtseize, those types of cards, and of course things like STRIXHAVEN Inspector. All of these types of cards that appear as multiples in decks are either on the move or are going to continue to move upwards in the future. Time Spiral Remastered had a very limited printing. I'm already completely out of stock in my store. I can't get any more, so what's out there is what's out there, folks. And we've seen that reflected in the sealed box prices climbing into the stratosphere. STRIXHAVEN Inspector is a very popular card both in Modern and Pauper. And again, this is one that generally appears as a 4 of. So it's no wonder we're seeing a 164% increase this week. Alright, and coming in at number 9 this week, we have a reserve list rare from Mirage, and that would be Mangara's Tome. This is also up 164% this week, to just over $23. We talked about this card a little bit back in early February when it took a spike up to around $9 from basically almost junk rare status. This is essentially an EDH playable card. It's a 5-mana artifact. When it comes into play, we search our library and choose any 5 cards. Shuffle those cards, put them underneath Mangara's Tome, and then shuffle your library afterwards. Of course, if you lose Mangara's Tome, those cards become permanently exiled. Now you can pay 2 instead of drawing a card and put the top card from under Mangara's Tome into your hand. It's a really nice way to set up combo or basically just grab some big stompies or whatever you think you're going to need out of your library. It doesn't really see any play in any other formats, and as I mentioned at the onset, it is important to note that this is a reserve list card. Our number 8 winner this week is Psionic Entity, a rare from Legends. At $126, this thing's up 176%. Now this isn't a reserve list card, it actually had a printing in 4th edition and some Renaissance foreign language cards back in the day. Not really a playable card. At 5 mana for 1 blue and 4, we're getting a 2/2 creature that has tap. It deals 2 damage to any target, but it deals 3 damage to itself. I checked over on EDH Rec, this really doesn't get any play in Commander. So what we're looking at here, especially considering the price of a Psionic Entity and every other printing, is essentially a collector buyout. Coming in at number 7, we have the first appearance of a sliver on our list this week, and that would be Brood Sliver, a rare from Legions. At $25, this is up 189% this week. A couple of things to note about why cards like Brood Sliver and some of the other ones on our list are moving this week. First off, obviously, Slivers had a huge reprint in Time Spiral Remastered. So we got things like Sliver Legions, which may have been previously unreachable due to its price point for some players. There's a lot of players who want to slam together a Sliver deck. I mean, who hasn't wanted to do that at some point or another? And now that some of these Slivers have gotten reprinted, especially expensive ones like Sliver Legion, that's becoming more and more of a reality for people. Aside from its other printing in Premium Deck Series Slivers, Brood Sliver really only has 1 printing, and that's the other thing that's important to note. A lot of these rare Slivers that have only had 1 printing in the past, although none of them are on the reserve list, they generally only have 1 printing, or at least if they've had another printing, it's been in some sort of specialty set, where the printing of that set hasn't really affected the quantities of that particular card being available in the market. Brood Sliver's 5 mana, for 1 green and 4, we're getting a 3/3 Sliver, and whenever a Sliver deals combat damage to a player, its controller may put a 1/1 colorless Sliver creature token into play. At nearly $27 now, our number 6 winner, Hex Drinker from Modern Horizons, is up another 203% this week. There's a lot of good reasons why this card is on the rise. Firstly, it gets a fair amount of play in Modern and even Legacy. It's a fantastic mana dump, and it's something like a commander with a good start. It can actually be swinging as a 4/4 on turn 2, and by turn 3 becoming a 6/6 with protection from everything. It can very easily and very quickly become a tough customer to deal with. Hex Drinker is one of those cards that when Modern Horizons was initially released, had a massive interest in it. A lot of people thought there was going to be a lot of play with this card, especially in things like Modern and Legacy. And it turned out that that was sort of the case, but since Modern kind of took a bit of a nosedive, this card hovered around the $7 to $10 mark for a long time. And today we're seeing Hex Drinker back in the spotlight, up 203% to nearly $27. Now our number 5 winner this week is another reserve list rare. This time we have a Null Rod from Weatherlight. I can't believe the price on this thing at almost $450. Geez, I remember when I first opened my store, I was selling these things for around the $15 to $20 mark, and that was only about 4 years ago. So it's amazing to see the price increases on some of these reserve list playables. Null Rod is a 2-mana artifact, and players cannot play any artifact abilities requiring an activation cost. See some play in Vintage and Legacy, but it also sees a fair bit of play in Commander. What is Wizards thinking? I was going to do a video on this, but there's a lot of other YouTube channels that already got one out there, so I'm sure you've had the opportunity to check out what's going on with things like our number 4 winner this week, Mox Tantalite from Modern Horizons. First off, this thing's up 231%, and I expect that this rise is going to continue at least for the near and foreseeable future. At $20, this thing was just $4 or $5 a few days ago. I've always had the sort of kind of unwritten policy that anything that has a Mox or Lotus in the name is generally going to be worth something at some point down the road. So I typically hold these cards if they have a low value like Mox Tantalite did. There's always going to be something that comes out that breaks these types of cards, and in worst case scenario, they generally increase over time because they're typically mana rocks, and that's always a valuable thing to have in Commander in one form or another. Now there's some new combos out with some spoilers, again we've seen from STRIXHAVEN, and specifically Oscar the Reconstructor wants to play things like Mox Tantalite. He has the ability to exile an artifact from your graveyard and then create token copies of it. So essentially with Mox Tantalite, you can do things like have a whole bunch of mana rocks and just ramp yourself out and do whatever you like. Also works really well with things like Lotus Bloom, the artifact lands like Ancient Den, and of course, Mishra's Bauble. I'm glad to see some cards on the list this week that are actually moving for legit reasons because they work with new cards from STRIXHAVEN. Our number 3 winner this week is the original print of Unstable Mutation from Arabian Nights at nearly $28. This thing is up 246% this week. It's had a lot of printings. There is no shortage of supply of this card by any stretch of the imagination. So the interest in this particular printing is strictly because it's the original print from Arabian Nights. And we've seen that going on a lot lately. For 1 mana, we're getting an enchant creature. Now that creature gets +3/+3, but during each of that creature's controller's upkeep, it gets a -1/-1 counter. Doesn't see a whole lot of play really in stuff like Commander, but it's always fun to see these original prints on the rise. Now coming in at number 2, we have the other sliver on our list, and that would be Magma Sliver, also from Legions. At $49, this is up 557% this week, for many of the same reasons that we discussed with Brood Sliver. This is the only printing of this card. Both of them are from Legions, a set from a long time ago, so supplies on things like Magma and Brood Sliver are getting quite low. For 1 red and 3, we're getting a 3/3 sliver, and all slivers have tap. Target sliver gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is the number of slivers in play. I expect if we see prices like this holding for Magma and Brood Sliver, we will see a reprint of these in the near future. And our big winner this week, up 3,476%, is an uncommon from Onslaught. That's right, it's Chain of Smog at nearly $18. This is a crazy potential mistake that Wizards has made with an interaction with a brand new card from STRIXHAVEN and a really old card like Chain of Smog. There's been a lot of this kind of stuff going on lately where all of a sudden these really old cards interact with new stuff that they're trying to do to create these crazy situations. Now, Chain of Smog works with a brand new card we've seen. It actually works with a couple of cards we've seen from STRIXHAVEN, and that would be Professor Onyx. Now, Professor Onyx is a Planeswalker, and she's 6 mana, so that's a lot slower of a progression to an instant kill for the entire board. However, Winterbloom Apprentice is a Golgari-colored 2-mana creature that has Magecraft. Now, Magecraft basically states that whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, then something particular happens. And in this case, Winterbloom Apprentice deals 1 damage to each opponent. I believe you also maybe gain a life, but that doesn't really matter. The important part is that it deals 1 damage to each opponent. Now, for just 4 mana, 2 for the Winterbloom Apprentice and 2 for Chain of Smog, you can target yourself, make yourself discard 2 cards, and then copy Chain of Smog and target yourself again, continuously doing this, creating a loop that deals 1 damage to each of your opponents each time you do this, essentially just blowing up the whole table. Now, this would work in something like Legacy and Vintage, but obviously this would be a premium 4 mana, easily obtainable combo in Commander. Is this type of stuff a mistake? Has Wizards gone too far? Why don't you guys let me know in the comments section below? Alright, before I get into cards I'm investing in this week, as always, if you're a subscriber, you know I want to thank you for your continued support. And if not, now's a great time to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Over on our online marketplace at www.dragonhillgames.com, you can find pre-orders for the brand new and upcoming set STRIXHAVEN, including sponsored videos for the YouTube channel. Just keep in mind that I can't ship any sealed product outside of Canada. I mentioned Teferi Time Raveler already once earlier this year when it was around the $10-11 mark. And at $13.81, I think that Teferi is still an excellent buy, especially if you need to fill out your playset. Obviously, he gets play in virtually every format except Pioneer, where he's banned. Really popular card for Modern, and I think we're going to see a lot more Teferi showing up in Modern control decks now that we have STRIXHAVEN. He basically puts the stopper on your opponents, making it so that they can only cast spells anytime they could cast a sorcery, essentially only on their turn. And while he doesn't completely shut down things like Magecraft, he definitely slows those new and upcoming types of decks down. Pick up your copies of Teferi Time Raveler now for under $14 while you can still get them for this price. Up next, we have Silence, specifically the Time Spiral Remastered printing. Now, this is the only alt-art printing, and by alt-art, essentially it just has that old style border. The actual art on the card has remained the same. But like with all of these playable old style border cards, we're really starting to see a move on these, and I expect that Silence isn't far behind. Even at $4.20, this is still a bit of a disparity between all of the other printings. The next closest printing, so there's definitely some room to play catch up there at the very least. But I fully expect this printing of Silence to surpass all of the other printings, considering it's gotten this old border treatment. And last but not least, we have our speculation play for the week. That's right, it's Mishra's Bauble, specifically the Double Masters printing at just $3. All of the other printings are north of $4, and this card gets a ton of play in every format where it's legal, especially things like Modern Jund Shadow. We've already seen and talked about this working with the brand new Oscar the Reconstructor, a new spoiler from STRIXHAVEN, so I expect that Mishra's Bauble is going to be on the move very shortly, and the Double Masters printing at just $3 is definitely your best way in. Alright, I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode of This Week in MTG Finance. If you did, go ahead and smash that like button. It really helps me out, and we'll see you again soon. Bye for now.